I'm rather surprised. Getting to wave 50 on Legend Onslaught was actually quite the challenge, and a fun one at that. But with all things, there's ways to get it done as easily as possible, and in this video I will show you how that is done with Titan. But since Onslaught is such a big thing, I'll break the video down into these chunks. The builds and weapons you should bring in with you, the team composition you should use, and for Onslaught itself, the map choices, the waves, how to deal with challenges including this horrible thing, and the upgrades you should be getting on the way. And so, what should you be using yourself? To the surprise of absolutely nobody, it's the Banner of War aspect. You know, that part of the very balanced Strand Titan subclass. We're going to be using it and getting aggressive throughout the whole 50 waves. And it's honestly the best way to go. And aggressive doesn't particularly mean dying frequently either. In my most recent run, I made it through the whole thing rather unscathed, with the only death coming from a self-rocket incident which I will not speak of. It's a rather standard Strand Titan build, but if you want more information on it, I have a video going into more detail here. But weapon wise, it's a little bit of a deviation to the usual. More suited to heavy ad clear which is needed throughout the waves. Kinetic slot, you actually want two things, a 1-2 punch shotgun and a sniper. The sniper is only needed for Tormentors, but quite important to have at the ready. Heavy weapons, the Dragon's Breath goes really hard. This can lock up an entire spawn of adds, chain ignitions, and essentially allows you to focus damage in two places at once. I cannot recommend this enough. Finally, for a primary weapon, the only thing I suggest really is stick to solar. Reason being the artifact mods Razor Precision and Flint Striker, allowing for high radiant uptime and ignitions without the need of running a solar subclass. Team composition. Let me tell you, this doesn't really matter as much as people think. The obvious choices are of course Solar Warlock with Well of Radiance, and I did have a few of these on the Vostok run and it did work out pretty well. But I also did a run on Midtown with teammates using a Void and Strand Warlock, and this worked maybe even better. If you have any sort of crowd control options, you are pretty much fine. If an LFG group is demanding you run a certain subclass, find another group, it's just not that deep. Same with Titan and Hunter. I know I'm suggesting Strand here, but it's just what I found the easiest. I bet any of the subclasses, yes, even Stasis, could put in some work here if you built it correctly. So now for Onslaught itself, starting with map choices. Just don't pick Moth Yards. It is way too open and enemies are not put into many obvious choke points. The other two are solid choices. Midtown has the best choke points and very clumped up enemies, but the Riverside ADU spawn is pretty bad. Vostok has weaker choke points, but all three locations are pretty reasonable to defend. Overall, if I was to recommend any of the three, it would be Vostok. Throughout Onslaught, you will be able to purchase upgrades to help defend your location. Tripwires, just don't do it. Turrets, maybe if you've got spare change, but the big ones are the decoys. Specifically the tier 3 shaxx decoys. These can hold the worst enemies including the Tormentors for a long time, but the best building strategy go with this. Hold out on spending for the first 20 waves and then build a decoy to tier 3, splitting building resources amongst your team. Whenever your team has enough for more tier 3 decoys, build these as required. It's much better to go all in on one decoy rather than spread out on multiple lower tier decoys, as these are easily destroyed and then you are building from scratch yet again. It is also a little bit RNG dependent. Some spots have just the one decoy location, others 2 and some even 3. In locations with more than one decoy, build the one first which will get the most attention from enemies. And the waves themselves act in a somewhat predictable pattern. There will always be a certain type of enemy, be it exploders, wizards with thralls or otherwise. And with this specific setup mentioned, exploders could probably give you the most problems, but thankfully these waves are pretty much the easiest of a bunch anyway. Any other type of wave is a similar strat, push up and cycle melee abilities with a 1-2 punch shotgun for higher health targets. Banner of War and Woven Mail will easily keep you up even into the higher waves. Also, be sure to use the super as much as possible. you will be surprised how fast it comes back, and just how much damage you can put out of it, especially with synthoceps procs. Pretty much every other wave you could clear the majority of with just this super. Now I do think the biggest problems will come with some of the challenge waves, specifically the demolitionists and especially tormentors. Demolitionists are maybe not too bad and can be crowd controlled with the rest of the wave, but should be dealt with quickly, as these spawn in quite close to the ADU. Tormentors though are a whole other level, but there's some tricks here too. How you deal with them depends on a few variables. The absolute best case scenario is it spawns in close to a decoy and focuses on that. If this is the case, don't engage the tormentor. Instead, clear the rest of the wave first. Taking on the tormentor after the wave 1v1 is a much less threatening prospect than dealing with both it and a bunch of enemies grouping up at the ADU all at the same time. The other thing when dealing with tormentors is you might notice they are kind of large, and you can actually use this to your advantage. On Vostok, you can use the cave system in the middle of a map, or on Midtown there is a few indoor corridors where the tormentor will just simply not be able to fit. If it's focused on you, it will only be able to use its Void Scythe attack, which is much more easily avoidable. Also, for tormentors, if it's focused on you rather than a decoy, I cannot stress this enough. Stay away from the ADU. Even if a tormentor is just standing somewhere near it, the ADU loses health over time. Drag it as far away as you can. And finally, what to do in the worst case scenario. The tormentor is heading straight to the ADU and you have no decoys. This is where you need to swap over to the supremacy and break both shoulders ASAP. This will make it aggress onto you, which at the very least takes it away from the ADU. If you have a teammate capable of swapping over to the divinity, this makes the whole ordeal much easier. But it's possible without. Kite the tormentor away and take sniper shots when possible. Once the wave's ads are cleared, the next wave won't begin until the tormentor is defeated, so you can take your time here. And the bosses in Onslaught. To be honest, these are kinda straightforward. Below wave 40, you can full send a 1-2 punch melee combo, dump your super and then repeat, and this will chunk the majority of their health. For the last few on waves 40 and 50, I would recommend swapping out the 1-2 punch shotgun to a sniper, and just play it a little bit on the safe side. Actually, talking of safe, there is also a few safe spots at the back of the map, if things do get a little bit too hectic. I'll show footage of these on screen now. The final boss is also static per week. At the time of recording, it's an ogre. But looking at triumphs, there's a week where it will be a tormentor. All I can say on this one is that the safe spots will become all the more relevant when that one is the current boss. So, to be honest, if you want it done, I think now could be the best time. You get a nice little emblem for doing so, and unfortunately not much extra loot. One extra chest for all that hard work does seem a little bit stingy, and there's also no guarantee to be a gold weapon either. But I suppose the fun is the challenge in this case. Thank you for watching.